I arrived at my parents' anniversary dinner, only to find my seat taken by my brother's new girlfriend. My mother told me to stand. Humiliated, I pocketed their $5,000 gift and walked out. Leaving them with the bill was the first time I truly stood up for myself. This is where the story truly begins, and you won't want to miss what happens. Make sure you're subscribed to see it through to the end. We're always curious. Where in the world are you all watching from today? Let us know in the comments. My leg was throbbing. It was a dull, persistent ache that radiated from my ankle all the way up to my knee, a reminder that I was only 3 weeks post-op from a reconstruction surgery that was supposed to keep me off my feet for a month. But I wasn't in bed. I wasn't resting. I was standing in the foyer of Le Miroir, the most exclusive French bistro in the city, wearing a custom-tailored emerald green tuxedo suit that I had bought specifically for tonight. I was leaning heavily on the cane I had tried to make look like a fashion accessory, but the sweat pricking at my hairline wasn't from the humidity. It was from the sheer physical effort of holding myself upright. This was supposed to be the night I finally made them proud. It was my parents' 30th anniversary. 30 years. For the last decade, their marriage had been a rocky terrain of silent treatments and passive-aggressive jabs, but they had decided to renew their commitment with a dinner that I had organized. Being a high-end corporate event planner, the burden naturally fell on me. I had pulled strings, called in favors to get the private alcove table, and curated the menu myself. But the centerpiece of my effort wasn't the venue. It was the envelope inside the inner breast pocket of my jacket. Inside was a cashier's check for $5,000. It was money I had scraped together by working double shifts, skipping my own physical therapy appointments to save on copays, and eating ramen for 2 months. It was intended to cover their second honeymoon cruise, a trip they had moaned about not being able to afford for years. I adjusted my cane, took a deep breath to steady the tremor in my hand, and walked toward the private alcove. As I rounded the corner, the scene hit me like a physical blow. The round table was set for 4. My mother, Megan, was seated in the plush velvet booth, looking radiant in a silver dress I had bought her. My father, Gary, was next to her, laughing at something. And there, in the seat directly across from them, my seat, the one with the specific ergonomic cushion I had requested for my ankle, sat a stranger. She was young, perhaps 22, with bleached blonde hair and a dress that was far too casual for the venue. She was leaning into my brother, Kevin. Kevin, who had promised to pick me up so I wouldn't have to drive on my bad ankle, but who had ghosted me 3 hours ago, forcing me to take an Uber. They were laughing, clinking glasses of champagne, bottles I had pre-ordered. "Happy anniversary," I said, forcing a smile, though my voice sounded brittle to my own ears. The laughter died instantly. Megan looked up, her eyes scanning me up and down. There was no warmth, no concern for the fact that I was leaning precariously on my cane. Her eyes narrowed at my suit. "Audrey," she said, her tone flat, "you're late." "The Uber took a while," I said, limping closer. "Kevin didn't show up." "Oh, right," Kevin said, not even looking at me. He was busy refilling the girl's glass. "Audrey, this is Tiffany. We met last week." "Hi," Tiffany chirped, giving a little wave without attempting to get up. She was sitting comfortably in my chair, my reserved chair. I looked at the table. 4 settings, 4 chairs, all occupied. "Mom," I said, gesturing to the table, "where am I supposed to sit?" Megan sighed, as if my presence was a logistical error she hadn't accounted for. She gestured vaguely to the space between the table and the waiter's station. "Well, we didn't know if you were actually coming, seeing as you're always so busy with work," Megan said, taking a sip of her wine. "And Kevin wanted to bring Tiffany. It's their first date." "First date," I repeated, the words tasting like ash. "This is your 30th anniversary dinner, Mom. I organized this. I paid the deposit." "Don't make a scene, Audrey," Gary chimed in, his voice jovial but dismissive. "It's just a chair." "It's not just a chair, Dad," I said, my voice trembling slightly. "I just had surgery. I can't stand for 3 hours." Megan rolled her eyes. "Oh, stop being so dramatic. You're fine. You walked in here, didn't you?" She waved a hand dismissively. We can't ask Tiffany to move, that would be rude. You don't have a +1, so just stand for now. Maybe pull up a stool from the bar later if one frees up. Stand for now? I stared at her. My ankle throbbed in violent protest. You want me to stand through a 7-course M? Deal. Just lean against the wall, Kevin chuckled, mouth full of bread. You look like a waiter in that suit anyway. The table erupted in laughter. Tiffany giggled behind her hand. Gary chuckled, shaking his head. Even Megan cracked a smile. Just stand for now. The words echoed in my head, louder than the laughter. I looked at them, my family. The people I had practically killed myself to please. I felt the heavy envelope in my pocket against my ribs. $5,000. $5,000 for people who wouldn't even offer me a chair while I was in physical pain. The pain in my ankle vanished, replaced by a cold, crystalline clarity. It was a sensation I had never felt before. It was the death of hope. I smiled. It wasn't a nice smile. Actually, I said, my voice dropping an octave, cutting through their laughter. I reached into my jacket pocket. I pulled out the thick, cream-colored envelope. I held it up so they could see the gold foil seal. I was going to give you this, I said calmly. $5,000 for your cruise. Happy anniversary. Megan's eyes widened. The laughter stopped. Kevin froze with his fork halfway to his mouth. I looked at the envelope, then at Tiffany sitting comfortably in my seat, then back at my mother. But, I continued, tucking the envelope back into my inner pocket, patting it securely against my heart. I think I'll keep this for someone who saves me a seat. I turned on my heel. Wait, Audrey. Megan's voice was shrill, panic rising instantly. You don't have to go. Sit down, we can get a chair, Gary shouted, half rising. Too late, I called out over my shoulder without breaking stride. I signaled the waiter who was hovering nearby with a bottle of vintage red. Cancel my part of the bill, and the champagne, put it on Gary's tab. As I walked out into the cool night air, the pain in my leg was excruciating, but my chest felt lighter than air. The betrayal was worse than the diagnosis itself, but the cure was finally in my hands. The moment the heavy glass doors of Le Miroir swung shut behind me, the adrenaline crashed. My leg gave out. I stumbled, barely catching myself on the valet stand. The young valet, a kid named Leo who knew me from the dozens of corporate events I had booked here, rushed over. Ms. Audrey, are you okay? He asked, his eyes wide with concern. I'm fine, Leo, I gritted out, straightening my tuxedo jacket. Just call me a car, please. I sat on the stone bench outside, trembling. It wasn't the pain in my ankle that made me shake, it was the aftershock of what I had just done. For 29 years, I had never said no to them. I was the fixer, the planner, the bank. I was the one who smoothed over the cracks in our family foundation with mortar made of my own money and self-esteem. My phone began to buzz. Buzz, buzz, buzz. I looked down, Mom calling. I declined it. Buzz, buzz, Dad calling. I declined it. Buzz, Kevin calling. I stared at the screen. Kevin, the boy who had once pushed me off a swing set when we were kids and then cried until I apologized for falling wrong. He was 31 years old, unemployed for the 4th time in 2 years, and currently dating a girl who looked like she was still in college. And he had laughed. He had called me a waiter. I declined the call and turned the phone to silent. The Uber arrived, a sleek black sedan that felt like a sanctuary. I slid into the back seat, giving the driver my address. As we pulled away, I watched the entrance of the restaurant. I saw Gary burst out the front doors, phone to his ear, looking frantic. He wasn't looking for his daughter. He was looking for the $5,000 that had just walked away. When I got back to my apartment, I didn't turn on the lights. I limped to the kitchen, poured myself a glass of water, and sat in the dark. The silence of my apartment, usually a source of loneliness, felt different tonight. It felt protective. I replayed the scene in my head. You don't have a +1, so just stand for now. It wasn't just the rudeness. It was the dismissal of my humanity. I had just undergone reconstructive surgery on my ankle, a direct result of a car accident I had gotten into while running an errand for them 3 weeks ago. I had been picking up Megan's dry cleaning in a rainstorm because she didn't want to ruin her blowout. I had hydroplaned. They knew that. They knew every screw and pin holding my bones together because I had sent them the X-rays. X-rays they had responded to with a thumbs-up emoji. My phone screen lit up again, a voicemail from Gary. I pressed play, putting it on speaker. "Audrey, this is ridiculous." Gary's voice filled the dark kitchen. He sounded out of breath. "Your mother is crying, you embarrassed us in front of Tiffany, and look, the bill came. It's more than we expected. You ordered the 8 Bordeaux, you can't just leave us with this tab. Come back, bring the envelope and we can talk about this. Don't be selfish." Selfish. I laughed. It was a dry, hacking sound. I looked at the envelope still sitting on the counter next to me. $5,000. It was my entire savings. I had nothing left in my emergency fund. I had risked my financial security to give them a cruise, hoping that maybe, just maybe, if I gave them something big enough, they would finally look at me with the same adoration they gave Kevin for simply existing. I picked up the envelope. I thought about tearing it up, but then I remembered something. I remembered the lease agreement. My parents lived in a beautiful condo downtown. It was their pride and joy. They told everyone they had downsized for lifestyle reasons. But they hadn't. They had downsized because Gary had gambled away their retirement fund 5 years ago. I had stepped in. I had used my credit, my name, and my income to sign the lease for them. I paid 40% of the rent every month because their Social Security didn't cover it. "Come back," Gary had said. "Don't be selfish." They thought the dinner was the leverage. They thought the embarrassment was the weapon. I tapped the envelope against the granite countertop. But they had forgotten one crucial thing. I whispered to the empty room. The lease was up for renewal in 4 days. And the primary leaseholder, the only one with the credit score to qualify, was me. To understand why I stood in that restaurant like a beggar in a tuxedo, you have to understand the ecosystem of my family. It wasn't just favoritism. It was a cult of personality, and the deity was Kevin. Kevin was born with a charm that I lacked. He was the high school quarterback, the prom king, the guy who could talk his way out of a speeding ticket. I was the studious one, the quiet one, the one who worked in the library. Megan loved Kevin's shine. She saw herself in him, or at least, the version of herself she wanted the world to see. I was useful, Kevin was decorative. When I started my event planning business, Megan told me it was a cute hobby. When I landed my first Fortune 500 client, she asked if I could get Kevin an interview for a VP position he was woefully unqualified for. When I bought my own apartment, she critiqued the crown molding. But the financial abuse started slowly. It began with loaning Gary money for investments that never panned out. Then it was covering Kevin's car insurance because he forgot. Then it was the condo. I did it because I was desperate for the one thing money couldn't buy, their approval. I thought if I just paid enough, worked hard enough, fixed enough problems, I would earn my seat at the table. Tonight proved that even if I bought the table, I still wouldn't be allowed to sit at it. I sat there in the dark, the pain in my ankle throbbing in time with my heartbeat, and let the memories wash over me. The time Megan forgot my college graduation because Kevin had a crisis with a girl. The time Gary used my birthday money to buy Kevin a new set of golf clubs. And then there was Megan. Megan wasn't just a mother who played favorites. She was an architect of insecurity. She was a woman who spent her days curating a perfect life on Facebook, posting photos of my handsome son, while cropping me out of family portraits because I didn't fit the aesthetic. She was a retired beauty queen who refused to age and refused to let anyone else shine. Her dismissal of me tonight wasn't accidental. It was calculated. By giving my seat to Tiffany, a girl she had known for a week, she was sending a clear message. You are replaceable. Your comfort is secondary to my image. You are here to serve, not to be served. She needed Tiffany to like her. She needed to be the cool mom. And if that meant making her crippled daughter stand in the corner, so be it. My phone buzzed again, a text from Megan this time. "Megan, I can't believe you ruined tonight. Tiffany thinks we're monsters. You need to apologize. Send the money via Venmo if you're too much of a coward to come back. We need to pay the bill." I stared at the text. The audacity was breathtaking. She wasn't worried about me. She wasn't worried about my leg. She was worried about the bill and the optics. I realized then that the antagonist of my life wasn't bad luck. It wasn't my ankle. It wasn't even Kevin, who was just a symptom of the disease. It was Megan. She was the one who set the rules. She was the one who decided who sat and who stood. And for 29 years, I had played by her rules. I looked at the text again, "Send the money." I opened my banking app. I looked at the transfer I had set up for their rent, scheduled to go out automatically on the 1st of the month. I didn't just have the $5,000. I held the keys to their entire lifestyle. Megan wanted to talk about ruining things. She had no idea. The morning sun didn't bring clarity. It brought a headache that throbbed in perf. Ecked rhythm with my ankle. I woke up on my sofa, still wearing my dress shirt, the tuxedo jacket thrown over the armchair like a discarded shell. My phone was a graveyard of notifications. 17 missed calls, 42 text messages. "Mom, you have to pay the bill. The manager is threatening to call the police." "Kevin, you're a psycho. Tiffany is crying." "Dad, Audrey, please, just answer." "Mom, I can't believe you're doing this to us. We're family." Family, the word felt like a slur. I pulled myself upright, wincing as I put weight on my bad leg. I needed coffee, and I needed a strategy. I limped to the kitchen, the silence of the apartment feeling less like a sanctuary and more like a war room. I opened my laptop. My first instinct was to block them all, to crawl into a hole and let the world burn, but the event planner in me took over. Crisis management mode. Step 1, assess the damage. I logged into my primary bank account. The $5,000 was still there, safe. But then I clicked over to the Family Emergency Savings account. It was a joint account I held with Gary. I had opened it 3 years ago when he had a scare with his blood pressure. I put $500 in it every month, just in case. I stared at the screen. The balance was $42.18. My breath hitched. There should have been nearly $18,000 in there. I clicked on the transaction history. A series of withdrawals, all made in the last 3 weeks. $2,000, $3,000, $5,000, all transferred to an account labeled K-Star Enterprises. "Kevin." I felt a cold sweat break out on the back of my neck. K-Star was Kevin's entrepreneurial handle. It was the name he used for his failed dropshipping business, his failed crypto scheme, and apparently his successful theft of my money. I grabbed my phone and dialed the bank, my hands shaking so hard I could barely tap the screen. "First National, this is Sarah speaking. How can I help you?" "I need to report unauthorized activity," I said, my voice surprisingly steady. "Joint account ending in 8904. The transfers to K-Star Enterprises. I didn't authorize them." There was a pause, the clicking of a keyboard. "I see here the transfers were authorized via telephone banking by the other account holder, Gary Miller. He provided the correct security answers." Gary, my father. The man who had laughed when I was told to stand. He hadn't just watched me be humiliated, he had funded the audience with my own money. "I see," I whispered. "Thank you." I hung up. The betrayal wasn't a crack, it was a canyon. I didn't scream, I didn't cry. I opened a new tab. Step 2, secure the assets. I navigated to the property management portal for my parents' condo. The Riverside Lofts. Luxury living for 2 people who had 0 income. I was the guarantor. I was the primary leaseholder. Their names were listed as permitted occupants. The lease renewal was pending. It was due for digital signature by Friday. I hovered the mouse over the button that said Renew Lease. I thought about the surgery I had undergone alone because Megan had a brunch date. I thought about the car accident I had gotten into running her errand. I thought of Tiffany sitting in my chair, drinking my champagne. I moved the mouse. I clicked Terminate Lease. A confirmation box popped up. Are you sure? This action cannot be undone. Occupants must vacate by the 30th. I clicked Yes. I wasn't done. I needed to know exactly how deep the rot went. I couldn't just guess. I needed ammunition. I picked up my phone and called David, a private investigator I used for vetting vendors for high-net-worth events. Audrey, David answered on the second ring. It's Sunday, you okay? I need a full run on Kevin Miller, I said, cutting straight to the chase. And look into a Tiffany associated with him. I need to know where $18,000 went in the last 3 weeks. And David, I need it by tomorrow. Audrey, that's your brother. No, I said, looking at the empty account balance on my screen. That's a thief. Monday morning arrived with the subtlety of a sledgehammer. I was at my office early, burying myself in the logistics of a tech gala, trying to pretend my personal life wasn't imploding. At 10:15 a.m., the receptionist buzzed me. Audrey, your parents are here. They say it's an emergency. I closed my eyes for a second. Of course they were here. They couldn't get me on the phone, so they were bringing the circus to my workplace. Send them to conference room B, I said. Do not let them into the main workspace. I grabbed a file folder. Inside was the printout of the bank transactions and the lease termination confirmation, and walked to the glass-walled conference room. Megan and Gary were already there. Megan was pacing, her heels clicking aggressively on the polished concrete floor. Gary was sitting, looking pale and reduced, wringing a baseball cap in his hands. When I entered, Egan spun around. She wasn't crying, she was furious. How dare you, she hissed, abandoning any pretense of a greeting. Do you have any idea how embarrassing that was? The manager threatened to call the cops, Audrey. We had to put the bill on 4 different credit cards. Hello to you too, Mom, I said, limping to the head of the table. I didn't sit. I needed the height advantage. Don't you get sarcastic with me, she snapped, slamming her designer bag onto the table. You left us there, with Tiffany. That poor girl was mortified. Tiffany, I repeated, the girl sitting in my seat. It was a chair, Gary burst out, looking up. God damn it, Audrey, it was just a chair. Why are you so petty? Petty? I opened the folder. I slid the bank statement across the polished table. It stopped right in front of Gary. Is stealing $18,000 from your daughter petty, Dad? The room went silent. The air conditioning hummed, a stark contrast to the sudden vacuum of noise. Gary looked down at the paper. His face went from pale to a sickly shade of gray. Gary stammered, that was a loan. A loan implies you asked, I said, my voice ice cold. A loan implies you intend to pay it back. You stole from the emergency fund, my emergency fund. Megan stepped in, instinctively shielding him. We needed it. Kevin is in trouble, Audrey. Real trouble. He has debts. We couldn't let him get hurt. We were going to pay it back once Gary's settlement came in. Gary's settlement from the class action lawsuit is $400, Mom, I said. I know. I filed the paperwork for him. You have so much, Megan screamed, her composure cracking. You have this job, this office, your fancy suits, you have everything, and you begrudge your brother a little help. A little help, I laughed, a harsh sound that startled me. I have paid your rent for 5 years. I have paid your car insurance. I have paid for your vacations. And when I show up with $5,000 more, you tell me to stand in the corner. That's what families do, Megan shouted. They support each other. No, I said, that's what hosts do for parasites. I pulled the second sheet of paper from the folder. Since we're talking about support, I said, sliding the lease termination notice toward them, you should probably see this. Megan snatched the paper up. She read it. Her eyes widened, bulging in a way that would have been comical if it weren't so tragic. Termination, she whispered. What is this? I'm not renewing the lease on the condo, I said calmly. I'm removing myself as the guarantor. You have 30 days to vacate, or you can sign a new lease yourselves if you pass the credit check. We won't pass the credit check, Gary yelled, standing up. You know that. This makes us homeless, Audrey. You're making your parents homeless. You have $18,000 of my money, I said. Maybe Kevin can lend it back to you, or maybe Tiffany has a guest room. You ungrateful little bitch, Megan spat, the veneer of the concerned mother completely gone, revealing the ugliness underneath. After everything we did for you, we raised you. We put a roof over your head. And I just paid for that roof for 5 years, I countered, leaning forward, my hands flat on the table. The transaction is complete. We're even. I will fix this, Megan hissed, grabbing Gary's arm. I will tell everyone what you've done. I will tell your aunt, your cousins, everyone. You will be alone, Audrey, completely alone. I was alone at that dinner table, Mom, I said softly. I've been alone for a long time. At least now I won't be broke. I pointed to the door. Get out before I call security. Megan made good on her threat before she even left the parking garage. By noon, my phone was vibrating with notifications from Facebook. She had posted a long, rambling status update. Heartbroken today. My own daughter, who we have supported and loved unconditionally, has decided to evict her elderly parents onto the street. She has become a cold, heartless corporate monster. We are terrified and don't know where we will go. Please pray for us. The comments were pouring in. Aunts I hadn't seen in a decade were calling me shameful. My cousin posted a snake emoji. But the social media storm was a distraction. I was focused on the investigation. At 2:00 p.m., an email arrived from David, the PI. The subject line was simply, Kevin Miller/Tiffany report. I opened the attachment. The details were worse than I imagined. Tiffany wasn't a girlfriend. Her name was Tiffany Stones, and she was an Instagram model who dated men for appearance fees. Kevin had hired her. He paid her $500 to attend the dinner with him to make it look like he was successful and settling down. He had used my stolen money to hire a prop so he could look better than me. But the report went deeper. The K-Star Enterprises C-Count wasn't just funneling money to Kevin. There were transfers going out to an online gambling site and a transfer to a heartbreakingly familiar name. L. Miller Consulting. L. Miller, Linda Miller, my mother's maiden name. My stomach turned over. Megan wasn't just enabling Kevin, she was skimming off the top. She was taking a cut of the money Gary stole from me to fund her own secret stash. I sat back in my office chair, the room spinning. Gary was the thief on paper, but Megan was the architect, and Gary, did he even know? I needed to break the alliance. I couldn't fight them as a unit. I needed to sever the link between the enabler and the mastermind. I texted Gary, just him. Audrey, Dad, meet me at the coffee shop on 4th. Alone. If Mom comes, I leave. I have something you need to see about the money. He showed up 40 minutes later. He looked 10 years older than he had that morning. He was wearing the same clothes, rumpled and stained with sweat. I didn't order him a coffee. I simply placed the iPad on the table between us. I know you took the money, Dad, I said, but I know you didn't spend it all. It was for Kevin, Gary mumbled, staring at his hands. He owes bad people, Audrey, sharks, they were going to hurt him. No, Dad, I said. He owes casinos, and he owes an escort agency. Tiffany was a hire. Gary looked up, confusion clouding his eyes. What? No, they're in love, she's a sweet girl. She cost $500 for the night, I said, swiping on the screen to show the transaction from the K-Star account to Tiffany's Venmo. Paid for with your theft. Gary stared at the screen. His mouth opened, but no sound came out. But that's not the worst part, I said. I swiped again. Look at this transfer, $3,000 to L. Miller Consulting. Gary squinted. L. Miller, Linda, your mother. Mom took a cut, Dad, I said gently. She knew you were stealing from me. She encouraged it. And then she took $3,000 for herself. Probably for that retreat she went on last month. Gary shook his head violently. No, Megan wouldn't. She said we were saving Kevin. She cried about it. She said we had no choice. She played you, I said. Just like she plays me. She made you the criminal so she could keep her hands clean and buy herself new things. She's not protecting Kevin, and she's certainly not protecting you. She's cashing out. Gary looked at the screen. He looked at the undeniable proof of the transfer dates. He looked at the emails I had recovered where Megan instructed Kevin on how to guilt-trip Gary. Mom to Kevin, tell him your knees are getting broken. He's soft. He'll cave. Then transfer my share to the PayPal account. I watched the realization shatter him. It wasn't a loud crack. It was a crumbling. The man who had laughed at me, who had blindly followed his wife for 30 years, suddenly looked like a child lost in a supermarket. She knew, he whispered. She knew it was a lie. She wrote the script, Dad, I said. He put his head in his hands and began to weep. It was a messy, ugly sound in the middle of the coffee shop. I ruined it, he sobbed. I ruined everything with you for them. Yes, you did, I said, refusing to comfort him. I needed him broken. I needed him to turn. But you can fix one thing. He looked up, eyes red-rimmed. How? The lease is done, I said, but the anniversary party isn't over yet. The big family gathering with the extended relatives is this Sunday at Aunt Clara's, right? Yes, he sniffed. Megan is planning to. She's planning to tell everyone her version of the story there. Good, I said, a plan forming cold and sharp as a diamond. I'll be there, and you're going to help me tell the truth. She'll kill me, he whispered. She's already killed your relationship with your daughter, I said, standing up and grabbing my cane. You have nothing left to lose, Dad, except the lie. I looked down at him. See you Sunday, save me a seat. Sunday at Aunt Clara's house was usually a predictable affair. Lukewarm potato salad, aggressive questions about my marital status, and my mother holding court like a monarch in a folding chair. But today, the atmosphere was different. It was charged. The air felt heavy, like the sky turns green before a tornado touches down. I arrived 20 minutes late. I wore a sharp black blazer and jeans, leaning on my cane. I didn't bring a covered dish. I brought a slim, leather-bound portfolio and a flash drive. As I walked through the sliding glass door into the backyard, the chatter died instantly. 30 heads turned. My cousins, who usually greeted me with indifference, stared with open hostility. Aunt Clara, a woman who lived for gossip, tightened her lips into a thin line. Megan was holding court near the grill. She was wearing a floral dress that cost more than my monthly car payment, paid for, I now knew, with my emergency fund. When S.H.E. saw me, she didn't just frown, she performed. She gasped, bringing a hand to her chest, playing the victim perfectly. Audrey, she said, her voice trembling just loud enough to carry across the yard. I didn't think you'd come, after what you've done to us. The murmur of the crowd grew louder. I'm just here to clear the air, Mom, I said, my voice steady. I limped further onto the patio. You posted quite a story on Facebook. I thought the family deserved the director's cut. We don't want to hear your lies, Kevin shouted from the cooler. He was holding a beer, looking smug. Tiffany was nowhere to be seen. Her contract obviously didn't cover family barbecues. You're kicking Mom and Dad out on the street. That's all we need to know. Is it? I asked, looking around the circle of faces. Is that really all you need to know? Aunt Clara, you commented on Mom's post that I was shameful. Uncle Bob, you sent me a text calling me a cold-hearted snake. I think you all deserve to know why I terminated the lease. Because you're selfish, Megan snapped, stepping forward, her eyes flashing with a panic she was trying desperately to hide. Because you make a little money and think you're better than everyone. You think because you bought us that apartment you own us, we are your parents. I don't think I own you, I said calmly. But I do think I own the $18,000 you stole from my bank account. The silence that followed was absolute. A bird chirped loudly in the oak tree, the only sound in the yard. "That's a lie," Kevin yelled, stepping between me and the family. "She's lying, she's crazy." "Am I?" I looked past Kevin, straight at my father. Gary was sitting on a bench near the fence, staring at his shoes. He looked small, defeated. "Dad, am I lying?" Megan whipped her head toward Gary. Her eyes were wide, signaling him furiously. "Stick to the script. Protect the lie." "Gary, tell her," Megan hissed. "Tell everyone she's making this up." Gary stood up slowly. He looked at Megan, then at Kevin, and finally at me. I saw the struggle in his face, 30 years of submission fighting against 3 days of agonizing truth. "She's not lying," Gary said. His voice was quiet, hoarse. "What did you say?" Megan screeched, her mask slipping. "I said she's not lying," Gary shouted, his voice cracking. The outburst shocked everyone, including him. "I took the money. I called the bank. I pretended to be Audrey to answer the security questions. I took $18,000. A collective gasp went through the yard. Aunt Clara put her hand over her mouth. "Because Kevin was in trouble," Megan shouted, pivoting instantly to the protective mother defense. "My son was in danger. We did what we had to do. Any parent would do the same." "Danger?" I asked. "Is that what we're calling it?" I walked over to the outdoor TV mounted on the patio wall, Kevin's pride and joy installation from last summer. I plugged my flash drive into the side port. The screen flickered to life. "I'm an event planner," I said, my voice projecting clearly. "I deal in details, and the details of Kevin's danger are fascinating." I clicked the remote. A photo appeared on the screen. It was a screenshot of the Venmo transaction. 2 Tiffany stones, amount $500, memo, dinner date service. "Kevin wasn't in danger," I said. "He was on a date he paid for with my medical savings. Tiffany isn't his girlfriend. She's an escort he hired to make himself look successful at the anniversary dinner." Kevin's face went crimson. The cousins started whispering. Someone laughed, a short, shocked sound. She's a model," Kevin stammered, looking around wildly. "She's an influencer." "She's a hired prop," I corrected, "just like your business." I clicked the remote again. A spreadsheet appeared. K-Star Enterprises, outgoing transfers. "Online poker," I read the list. "DraftKings, crypto scams, and a luxury car rental for the weekend." I looked at Kevin. "You weren't paying off loan sharks, Kevin. You were renting a Mercedes to impress a girl you were paying by the hour." Megan looked like she was going to be sick. She turned to the family, her hands shaking. I didn't know. Gary told me it was a debt, I thought we were saving his life." She was good, she was so good. She was throwing Kevin and Gary under the bus to save herself, playing the ignorant, heartbroken mother. "You didn't know?" I asked softly. "No," Megan sobbed, tears flowing freely now. "I had no idea. I just wanted to help my son." "Then explain this," I said. I clicked the remote one last time. The screen filled with a single, enlarged bank transfer receipt. From K-Star Enterprises to L. Miller Consulting, amount $3,000, date October 14th. "October 14th, I said. 2 days after Dad transferred the first chunk of stolen money to Kevin. You had Kevin send you a kickback, Mom, $3,000. I turned to face her. She was frozen. The tears had stopped instantly. "You knew Dad was stealing from me," I said, my voice ringing with the finality of a judge's gavel. "You encouraged it. You told him what to say to the bank. And then you took your cut. You monetized your own husband's theft and your daughter's surgery fund so you could. What? Go to that spa weekend? Buy that dress?" The yard was deadly silent. Aunt Clara stepped away from Megan, creating a physical gap between them. Megan looked around, searching for an ally, for a sympathetic face. There were none. Even Kevin was looking at her with betrayal. He hadn't known she skimmed off the top of his loot. Megan whispered, "I deserve nice things too." It was the truth, finally, the ugly, naked truth. Gary walked over to me. He didn't look at Megan. He stood next to me, shoulder to shoulder. "We are leaving the condo on Friday," Gary announced to the family. I am getting a job, and I am going to pay Audrey back every single cent, even if it takes the rest of my life. He looked at Megan. You can come with me to the efficiency apartment I found, or you can go, but I'm done lying for you, Linda. Megan looked at the small, broken man she had controlled for 3 decades. She looked at me, standing tall in my tuxedo jacket. She looked at her family, who were looking at her like she was a stranger. She didn't scream, she didn't fight, she just shrank. The queen of the patio had lost her crown. I think you should go, Aunt Clara said, her voice icy. This is a family gathering, and frankly, Linda, I don't think you know what that word means. The fallout was swift and absolute. Megan tried to spin the story one last time on Facebook, claiming the images on the TV were photoshopped, but the damage was done. The family had seen the transactions. They had seen Gary's face. They had heard her admit she deserved nice things while standing over the digital corpse of my savings account. By Friday, the Riverside lofts were empty. I didn't go to help them move. I hired a moving company to pack them up, my final act of charity, because I knew Gary couldn't manage the heavy furniture alone, and Kevin certainly wouldn't help. Kevin had disappeared the moment the money tap ran dry, reportedly crashing on a friend's couch in another state, leaving his investors and his family behind. Megan and Gary separated 2 weeks later. It wasn't a dramatic divorce. It was a simple dissolution of a partnership that had gone bankrupt. Megan moved in with her sister in Florida, spending her days complaining about the humidity and her ungrateful children. She still sends me birthday cards with passive-aggressive Bible verses. I burn them unopened. But Gary stayed. He rented a small studio apartment above a garage in the suburbs. It was the size of my living room. He got a job at a hardware store, mixing paint and cutting keys. It was humble work, hard on his knees, but he did it. 6 months after the anniversary dinner, I met him for coffee. I was walking without the cane now, my ankle fully healed. I walked into the diner and saw him in a booth, wearing his orange work vest. He looked tired, but he looked real. Hey, Dad, I said, sliding into the booth. Audrey, he smiled, a genuine, crinkly-eyed smile I hadn't seen since I was a child. He pushed an envelope across the table. It wasn't $5,000. It was a check for $200. It's not much, he said, looking down at his coffee. But it's the first installment. I did the math. At this rate, I'll be square with you by the time I'm 92. I laughed. It wasn't a bitter laugh this time. 92, huh? You better eat your vegetables then. I'm sorry, he said, his voice dropping. I know the money doesn't fix it. I know I broke something I can't glue back together. I let her hurt you because it was easier than fighting her. I was a coward. I looked at him. I saw the regret etched into the lines of his face. I saw the man who had lost his home, his wife, and his pride, just to try and regain his dignity. You were, I agreed. I wasn't going to lie to make him feel better. That was the old dynamic. You were a terrible father that night, and for a long time before that. He nodded, accepting the verdict. But, I continued, reaching out and tapping the envelope. You stood up when it mattered. You told the truth in the backyard. That counts. I didn't push the check back. I took it. Taking it was important. It meant I respected him enough to hold him accountable. It meant he was an adult, not a dependent I had to shield. I'm keeping this, I said, and the next one. Good, he said. So, how's work? How's the ankle? Work is busy, I said, and the ankle is strong. I actually went for a run this morning. That's good, he said softly. That's really good. We ate our burgers. We talked about the weather. We talked about his job at the hardware store. It wasn't a perfect, movie-ending reconciliation. There were no tears of joy, no hugs that erased the past. There was still a distance between us, a scar tissue that would probably never fully fade. But as I looked at him, eating his fries, paying for his own meal with money he had earned, I realized something. I wasn't the bank anymore. I wasn't the fixer. I wasn't the doormat. I was just Audrey. And for the first time in my life, I was sitting at a table where the seat was genuinely saved for me.